part lost in the mountains. Night was falling over a small village in the Himalayan mountains. The faint light of the moon barely pierced through the clouds, illuminating the snow-capped peaks and dark forests. In this silence, there was a special mystery that always attracted adventurers and explorers. Alexei, a well-known mountaineer and blogger, decided to venture into this wilderness to find and film one of the most mysterious creatures, the Yeti, also known as the Snowman. Numerous stories and legends about it stirred his imagination. Accompanying him on the expedition were his friends, Maria, an experienced photographer and researcher of mystical phenomena, and Ivan, an enthusiastic biologist. They arrived in the village that served as the starting point for their journey. The locals met them with caution, warning them that something inhabited the deep forests that was better left undisturbed. But the team was determined. Alexei was convinced that the legends of the Yeti were not just myths and that he could prove its existence. The village itself was a picture of serenity and simplicity, with wooden huts nestled between towering pines and snow-covered roofs. The air was crisp and cold, carrying the scent of pine needles and wood smoke. Despite the warmth and hospitality of the villagers, there was an underlying tension, a sense of foreboding that Alexei couldn't shake off. Preparing for the expedition. Before setting off into the mountains, Alexei and his friends spent several days in the village, gathering information. They talked to the locals, trying to learn more about encounters with the Yeti. Most of the stories were similar. People saw strange, huge footprints in the snow, heard eerie cries at night, and some even claimed to have seen the Snowman from a distance. The village elder, an old man with deep wrinkles and wise eyes, was particularly insistent in his warnings. He told of how the Yeti was not just a beast, but a guardian of these lands and should not be disturbed. Many years ago, he began his story. One of our villagers, a hunter named Tinger, decided to capture the Yeti to prove its existence. He gathered the best hunters and went into the mountains. A few days later, only one returned, barely alive. He told how their group was attacked and the creature was much stronger and smarter than they had anticipated. The elder's words hung heavy in the air. The flickering firelight cast long shadows on the walls of his hut, and the atmosphere was thick with tension. Despite this, Alexei and his team felt their resolve harden. They believed that modern technology and preparation would prevent them from repeating the mistakes of the past. The next few days meticulously planning their expedition. They checked and rechecked their equipment. Cameras, GPS devices, food supplies, and survival gear. Maria studied maps of the area, marking potential routes and locations of reported sightings. Ivan prepared his biological sampling kits, eager to collect any evidence of the Yeti's existence. In search of tracks, on the third day, they left the village and headed into the mountains. The path was arduous and dangerous, but Alexei, Maria, and Ivan were experienced travelers and knew how to deal with difficulties. They moved deeper into the forest, following ancient trails and avoiding areas prone to avalanches. The forest was dense and silent, the trees standing like silent sentinels guarding their secrets. The deeper they went, the more oppressive the atmosphere became. The only sounds were the crunch of snow under their boots and the occasional rustle of an animal in the undergrowth. On the second day of their trek, they came across the first signs of the Yeti's presence. Huge footprints in the snow led deeper into the forest. Alexei was thrilled. Maria took numerous photographs, and Ivan collected samples of the snow around the tracks for analysis. "These tracks are fresh," Ivan noted. "It looks like the creature passed through here only a few hours ago." That night, they set up camp at the base of a large slope. They lit a fire to keep warm and discussed their plan for the next day. Maria noticed that the forest around them had become much quieter than usual. There were no sounds of animals or the rustling of the wind in the trees. Part 4. The first encounter. Several days into the expedition, the group ventured deeper into the forest. Every step through the snow was difficult, but they kept moving, knowing something incredible lay ahead. One evening, while setting up camp, Maria noticed strange tracks near These were huge footprints, clearly not left by a human. "Alexei, Ivan, look at this," she exclaimed, pointing to the tracks. Ivan approached and closely examined them. "These tracks are fresh," he said. It looks like the creature passed through here only a few hours ago. Alexei excitedly filmed the tracks and suggested they continue their journey the next morning. The night was restless. Strange sounds, resembling cries or howls, echoed in the distance. No one could say for sure what it was, but everyone felt that something was watching them. These sounds were unlike any animal or the wind. The fire crackled and cast dancing shadows on the snow. Maria sat quietly, her camera in hand, trying to capture any movement in the darkness. Ivan carefully documented the tracks, taking measurements and samples. Alexei recorded everything, narrating their findings and speculating about the creature they were pursuing. Part 5. Shadows in the forest. In the morning, they continued following the tracks. The forest grew darker, and the trees seemed alive, their shadows moving like sinister figures. Alexei led the way, filming everything on camera, when he suddenly stopped and pointed ahead. "Look," he whispered. At the edge of the forest, they saw a huge figure standing in the distance. It was the Yeti. It stood motionless, seemingly assessing the uninvited guests. Tall, covered in thick fur, with enormous hands and feet. The Yeti looked terrified, but its eyes seemed to express a certain sadness and loneliness. Maria tried to take a photo, but the figure suddenly vanished, as if it had dissolved into the air. The group was in shock, but even more determined to continue. Their curiosity was fueled by new questions. What was this creature, and why was it? As they pressed on, the forest seemed to close in around them. The trees whispered secrets in the wind, and the shadows grew darker and more ominous. The tracks led them deeper into the heart of the wilderness, where few dared to venture. Part 6. The abandoned cabin. The next day, they came across an abandoned cabin. Inside, everything was covered in dust and snow, but strange symbols and paintings depicting huge creatures resembling the Yeti were drawn on the walls. The locals told legends that the Yeti guarded these lands and should not be disturbed, but someone had clearly tried to do so before. Ivan, examining the walls, found an old journal. It belonged to a man who lived here many years ago and was also searching for the Yeti. The entries were full of fear and despair. The last pages of the journal described how the creature came for him at night and took him into the forest. "We need to be careful," Ivan said, closing the journal. "It seems these are not just legends." The cabin itself was eerie, with broken windows and a sagging roof. The floorboards creaked underfoot and the walls were covered in cobwebs. Alexei found an old map pinned to the wall, showing routes and locations marked with notes about sightings and strange occurrences. Be night attack? That night, as they sat by the fire discussing their plan for the next day, a loud crack suddenly broke the silence. They saw movement in the dark forest. Something big was approaching. Alexei turned on the camera, hoping to capture it, but what they saw made their blood run cold. The Yeti, huge and terrifying, stood at the edge of the forest, its eyes glowing in the dark. It let out a dreadful roar that echoed through the forest. The group realized they had no chance in this battle. Alexei tried to step back but stumbled into Maria, and they both fell to the ground. The Yeti was getting closer, but suddenly it stopped and looked to the side. Another roar sounded in the distance. The group couldn't believe their ears. Suddenly, they realized they were in the heart of the Yeti's territory and would have to fight for survival, not only with one but with several of them. The air was thick with tension, and the forest seemed to come alive with unseen dangers. The Yetis communicated with each other in low growls and roars, creating an eerie symphony that made the group's hair stand on end. Part A. Taking advantage of the moment when the Yetis were distracted, the group decided to run. They dropped everything they could and ran through the forest, trying not to look back. Every step was hard, but adrenaline drove them forward. The roars and cries still echoed in the distance, but they didn't intend to stop. They ran through the forest and reached a river. Alexei knew that if they could cross the river, they might confuse their tracks and possibly escape the pursuit. They plunged into the icy water, fighting the current, and on the other side, they collapsed to the ground, breathing heavily and shivering from the cold. The forest on the other side was just as dense and dark, but they felt a glimmer of hope. They moved cautiously, trying to put as much distance between them and the Yetis as possible. The sounds of the forest seemed to close in around them, creating an oppressive atmosphere that made every rustle and snap of a twig feel like a threat. Part 9. Rescue. The next day, the group kept moving without a clear plan, just to get as far away as possible from where they saw the Yeti. Their hopes of rescue dwindled with each passing hour. But suddenly, they heard the sound of an engine. It was a rescue helicopter. The locals, worried about the group's long absence, had sent out rescuers to search for them. Alexei, Maria, and Ivan were rescued and brought back to the village. Their story of the Yeti encounter became sensational, and the videos Alexei filmed attracted worldwide attention. The rescue was a blur of activity. Paramedics checked them for injuries, and the villagers gathered around, eager to hear their story. Alexei's footage was shown on the local news, and soon the story spread beyond the village, capturing the imagination of people around the world. Returning home. After returning to the city, Alexei, Maria, and Ivan became true heroes. Their stories about the Yeti encounter spread across the globe, sparking numerous debates and discussions. Some believed while others were skeptical, but no one remained indifferent. Alexei continued his blog, sharing new research and expeditions. He received numerous offers from various TV channels and scientific organizations. Maria became a famous photographer, with her Yeti photos gracing the covers of many magazines. Ivan dedicated his life to studying legends and myths, trying to find the key to the Yeti's existence and other mysterious creatures. Each of them dealt with their newfound fame in different ways. Alexei found himself invited to speak at conferences and on talk shows, where he shared his experiences and insights into the Yeti. Maria's photos were exhibited in galleries, and she published a book of her adventures, which became a bestseller. Ivan's research was published in scientific journals, and he was invited to join several expeditions to study other cryptids and mysterious phenomena. Epilogue. Several months passed. Alexei, Maria, and Ivan continued their work, but each of them knew that the encounter with the Yeti had changed them forever. They knew that somewhere in the Himalayan mountains, these mysterious creatures still lived, and that one day they might meet the Yeti again to learn more about what lies hidden in the unknown depths. But even after all they had gone through, none of them regretted their decision to embark on that expedition. They realized that the world was full of mysteries and secrets, and that each adventure was a step toward their discovery. Their story inspired many others to pursue their dreams and explore the unknown. The legend of the Yeti continued to grow, fueled by their encounter and the questions it left unanswered. And so the mystery of the Snowman remained, a tantalizing enigma that beckoned to all who dared to seek the truth